All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the agenda review for August 2022. I'll turn it over to Chief of Staff James Smith to lead us through the process. James.
Okay, thanks, President Melendez. We have a pretty straightforward agenda, and I think we'll just get started with it. The first item is Finance Committee, Introductory number 292, legislation approving the cancellation or refund of taxes and charges totaling just over $7,000. Any questions from council on Introductory 292? Hearing none, Introductory 293 is legislation authorizing a master license agreement with Level 3 Telecom of New York. Any questions?
I do have one question.
Sure.
Because this did not get answered in my finance committee meeting, but I don't have it in front of me, so I'll pull it up in a second. Okay, you can keep going.
Okay, we'll come back to that one. That will take us then to Introductory number 294, legislation related to the strategic planning for the Office of Financial Empowerment. This legislation will establish $20,000 maximum compensation with Excelsior Performance Group. Any questions on 294? If there aren't any, we'll go to Introductory 295. Legislation establishing $40,000 as maximum compensation for an agreement with Fire and Police Selection for the development of an entry-level firefighter written examination.
Just a quick question. Do they have any background or any successes recruiting diverse populations of firefighters? I know it's an issue that's been brought up and the exam potentially being a barrier. So just any background on what ideas they have around that.
We'll get an answer to that question.
This is kind of off topic, but I'll go back just because it's mentioned in the RFP, James, in 294, and I just wanted to capture this. And it's off topic, but I just want to capture this in this meeting because it does mention this in that RFP, and I want us to think about this in the near future, especially Dr. Gruber and President Melendez. In that RFP, it says the City Council attachment to transmit letter for any PSA that exceeds 10,000. And so I would offer for consideration in the future that we begin to think about our PSAs increasing that amount to $20,000 to be in parity with the county and other departments that, to reflect inflation and things of that nature. I think $10,000 threshold for PSAs is too low. And I think we missed a lot of opportunities when we look at the Race Commission business development report. I think we're missing a lot of opportunities for some of our micro businesses and small businesses to have opportunities with vending with the city in regards to some of the red tape when bringing small amounts of dollar amounts to the city. And I think it could open up the door to do more business with some of our micro businesses if we look in the future. Now, I know it's not germane to this particular referral, but it does mention about that 10,000 threshold. And I think that we need to be looking at that in the future, increasing that threshold to be in parity with some of our partners. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. Okay, so we are on Introductory 295. Are there any other questions on 295 for fire recruitment? If not, we'll go to Introductory 296, which is legislation authorizing an amendatory agreement with CipherWorks for online training programs for city employees. The amendment increases the total compensation by just over $6,700.
Hold on. I'm sorry. You're moving a little. I'm in the car, so y'all bear with me. I'm not sitting at a desk or a table, so I have to move through these things. I am parked, so I'm not driving. I'm safe. Back to 295, the fire to police selection entry-level fire written examination. Question. In this $40,000 as maximum compensation for the agreement, and I don't see if I missed it, please forgive me and you can let me know. In this, is included in this, are there any pre-examination things embedded into this particular referral? pre-examination entry testing exam pre-exam stuff built into this, or is it just for the creation of the exam itself? That's my question. I want to know, what are we doing around preparing people for the exam, both written and physical?
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on introductory 295? If not, we'll move to introductory 296, which is the amendatory agreement with CipherWorks for the training program for city employees. If there's no questions on that, introductory 297 is another amendatory agreement, this time with Collaborative Solutions to provide ongoing optimization support for Workday, which is the city's payroll system. And it's a term of 1 year, maximum compensation of $200,000. Any questions related to Workday and this amendatory agreement?
Yeah, James, I have one question. The transmittal uses the term ongoing support. That's in quotes, ongoing support. We've been funding consultants around Workday for a very long time, probably since before I got on council, actually. And I'm wondering how long ongoing support is going to be, and if they imagine this, that we're going to need to have something in perpetuity, or if they see an end date to needing this kind of consulting and contracting.
And I might ask Josanne, just because I work within the system and deal with these issues and have had some conversation with payroll folks, I think there may be some changes coming specifically related to upgrades with Workday that may be implemented. So it might be good to know that, so council is aware of what those might be and how they might be reflected in this contract. Are there any other questions on introductory 297? If not, we'll move to introductory 298, which is legislation to enhance the community's racial and structural equity initiatives as follows: authorizing an intermunicipal agreement with Monroe County and also amending the 22-23 budget of the city of Rochester. Any questions on the race commission item?
What methods are being used to track the impact? And like, how will we know it's successful, and how are the things learned in year one going to be applied to year two and the following years that it's budgeted for?
So put the question down, but I can speak to this. This is the first ever done of its kind that I'm aware of at this magnitude. Many of you had an opportunity to come out to the one we had on Jefferson Avenue. We had over 50 providers that attended that particular vendors for that particular event. It's all centered around mental health, addiction services, all wraparounds, you name it, they were there, housing, legal, etc. The tool that we're using right now in the beginning to track success is the survey. After the survey is done, the survey will help us identify the gap services that will be needed to be presented in the R centers that we're planning to provide the gap services through existing partners that we're currently working in. Once we can identify those gap services based on the community's identified need from the survey, then we'll report back out to the community from the survey what the community has said are their identified needs. Then when we provide the providers that information to provide the gap services, case in point, we had the one in just a few weeks ago. Veterans Office was there. We have over 13,000 veterans in this city. There were 3 veterans that came and got services as a result of that fair that would never have gotten a check had they not known about that. So that's an indicator. When these services come into the R centers, they will track the people that they're servicing and then report back out that mechanism. So that's going to be built in as well as there's going to be an advisory committee that will also be helping to oversee this whole initiative going forward. But of course, the question is asked, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of information in that some of these things are developing because this is a new initiative, but I gave you just an example of how we've already seen results and how we're tracking those results. But the survey is really going to help us to move as to what services are being provided, and then the service agencies are going to keep track, as well as working with Department of Recreation.
Sounds good. That's great. That's really helpful to know. And I think one of the things we've heard is how we're tracking things. So it's really nice to see how we're measuring the impact and being able to learn from that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. There's no other questions.
James, just back to 293 for a second. My question is about, I just want to know what the master licensing agreement is going to, how level 3 telecom, where they are planning on expanding to, and if there's a particular reason why they are signing this master licensing agreement now. I guess those are the major questions.
And quickly adding to 293, is there someone we can meet with to just break down all the questions we might have? I don't know who that person would be, but just—
You mean about the master licensing agreement generally?
Yes, I struggled a bit to grasp it.
Yeah, I think Josanne, Josanne, can you just make sure that Commissioner Perrin is available at the committee meeting? And Stanley, I would just recommend asking Commissioner Perrin to explain it, because it is, I think it's easier to explain via kind of a conversation than written. That'll probably help.
Absolutely, agreed.
It involves law as well, but Linda will also be there. So yeah, you should ask at the meeting. I'll give them a heads up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Back to 298. Willie, you might have the answer for this. What's the total budget for the race commission each year? For this year and next year, should I say?
I don't have that answer. So that's a good question. Of the total budget of the entire race commission, I don't have that answer.
Okay. The reason for that, I want to see how much this $5,000 this year is really going towards in the grand scheme of the entire budget. Is it a drop in a bucket? And then 15,000 for next 4 years for our race commission. You know, is it 15,000 out of 150,000, or is it half the money? I want to make sure that the county is putting in appropriate amount of money for us.
I can assure you one thing, though, Councilman Pio, it's a drop in the bucket.
I figured.
But great question.
Okay. It sounds like we're done with the questions related to the Finance Committee, so we'll move on to Neighborhood and Business Development. Introductory number 299, legislation approving the sale of one property, 84 Salisbury Street. No questions on 299. We'll look at another sale of property, which is introductory number 300, acquisition of the vacant industrial lot at 52 Fall Street for $40,000. Also, we have another acquisition, which is introductories number 301 and 302, 395 Hudson Avenue, which is legislation authorizing the acquisition of this real property by negotiation of properties on Edward Street and Hudson Avenue. And this also includes the issuance of bonds in the amount of $65,000.
Could we just get a background one pager on the Upper Fall Housing Initiative, or any background information about it?
Okay, noted. Any other questions on introductories 301 and 302?
Yes, 301. Why for $65,000? Why are we using bonds instead of cash on hand from the city?
question. Good question. I'm sure there's a good answer. Josanne will let us know what that is. Any other questions on 301, 302? If not, we'll go to introductory 303, legislation authorizing a 5-year extension of the choice tax abatement program for new owner-occupied residential units.
Yes. Is there a way we can get a plot map? It says since exception 62 owner occupied units have been completed. Could we get a plot map of where those are, please?
I think they're preparing that because we expected that would be a question, but it'll still
Okay.
be an agenda review.
And a breakdown, please, of how many units each of those 62 properties are. And if we have the information pertaining to the values of the property when they were built, I would love to see if it's feasible for the average citizen to really take advantage of this pilot program.
Good. Are there any other questions related to this payment in lieu of taxes introductory?
Yeah, it's not gonna be a very sophisticated question. So if I have to refine it later, I will. But Josanne, maybe you remember for the last couple of years, there's been some hangups around how ultimately choice is approved by Comida, right? Where we approve it and we push it forward, but Comida is the one who ultimately is the final stamp. And if my recollection is that there were a couple things that former Commissioner Kirkmeyer had as hangups with the way choice was being implemented. And again, not a sophisticated question. I can go back and look at what those things were through emails that I have with Gary. But I'd love maybe just James, looks like you're sort of remembering-ish.
But I was reluctant to say anything, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Gary definitely took issue with it, some choice.
I guess, why don't I frame the question this way, and then I'll go back and maybe I'll refine it later. But what is the status of the choice tax abatement and Comida's role in the choice tax abatement? I'll start there, and then James, if you can help me in any way, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I will. I'll have some conversation in the meantime, see if I can remember to. So, last item before the Neighborhood Business Development Committee this cycle, so that will take us to Parks and Public Works. The first item there is introductory 304 and 305. Legislation related to the Rochester Running Track Bridge Improvements Phase 1 project, authorizing a mandatory agreement with Bergman Associates, the architects, engineers on the project, to increase maximum compensation by $33,000, and also to approve a resolution in a format that is required by the New York State Department of Transportation. Any questions on this introductory? If there's no questions, we'll go to introductory 306. This is legislation authorizing a change in the direction of traffic flow on Stout Street between Garson Avenue and Melville Street. It's going from two-way to one-way northbound.
I'm so sorry. Can we go back to 305, 305 real quick? The last sentence in the main paragraph says phase 1 project stabilizes the bridge and mitigates deterioration to ensure that the bridge is preserved for a permanent conversion of the structure to a multi-use facility. Are we talking about multi-use track? Because multi-use facility sounds like it's a building.
And my understanding is this is part of Rock the Riverway, and it would be like a multi-use trail that would be ultimately put there. That would be, for biking and walking and other uses.
Okay, and
what do we get clarification from the administration?
Okay, and what are we doing to ensure that it's still usable in the wintertime when there's snow on the ground? Please.
We will find out. Okay, any more questions on 304, 305?
Sorry
If
about
not, it's okay. If not, we talked about the change. No, that's A-okay. We're here to ask the questions on the whole agenda, so no problem. So we talked about the change in direction on Stout Street. So the next item is introductory 307, which is changing the direction of traffic flow on Chamberlain Street between Parcells Avenue and Melville Street from one-way northbound to one-way southbound. Are there any questions related to that introductory?
So on 306, it stated that that was based off of a petition, but 307 doesn't state that.
Now, 307 was done at the request of the Monroe County Department of Transportation.
Have we received any input from the community about that? Have they asked?
Notices were sent to the residents and the property owners, and they didn't receive any responses.
So we mailed it to them, I'm guessing?
I believe so.
And it looks like the one change triggered the other change, as the
Yep.
county are the traffic engineers for the city of Rochester. So in their function as the city's traffic engineer, they made the determination.
Okay.
Any questions on those changes in street direction? Now we'll go to introductory 308. Introductory 308 is legislation authorizing the issuance of bonds totaling $112,000 and the appropriation of the proceeds thereof to finance remedial investigation work at the former United Dry Cleaners site, which was located on Genesee Street.
Is this the only property that we are expecting to do this for? Because I feel like that area in general might have more sites. Is this the only area we expect to do this for, should I ask?
I know DES has an extensive file on that, Joanne, so I'm sure we can get a lot of information. If there's no other questions, go to introductory 309, which is legislation related to the development of an organics management plan, which is to authorize the mayor to enter into a grant agreement with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and also to authorize the receipt and use of $40,000 in anticipated grant funds from NCON. Any questions on 309?
Yeah, just when the, sorry, let me get to it for a second. The question is, when we're gonna have a report on the on the Rock City Compost pilot program and recommendations to expand it.
Okay.
To add to that, specifically, how are we expanding into the Northwest? Because myself and Mitch met with them before, and that was a area of concern.
Okay, great.
If they want to look at this as a pilot, and I think the end goal, if it works well, is to go citywide, but that can certainly be a question.
So this is another pilot on top of the Rock City Compost, which was a pilot?
No, this is just a grant to make it.
No,
organic.
I'm sorry. I was talking about the compost. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. There's no other questions on that item. We'll move to introductory 310. Legislation authorizing an agreement with Harder Seacrest and Emery for the continuation of legal services related to brownfield properties, including those located on and near the former vacuum oil site.
Has anyone stepped foot in this area and taken a look at this? Because it could be a gold mine for the future if we actually get this cleaned up.
So
I
you-
worked there for about 8 years.
Yeah.
I have a question about James, frame this in the right way, please, but I'm sure we can't know everything, but I'd like to know some type of status update on the legal on the litigation that the neighboring property has and how it impacts the way we're going to approach this. Because I know there's separate private litigation happening, correct?
Yeah, there was. I'm aware that there was at one point. Yeah.
I'd just like a status update there.
Okay. Are there any questions?
What is the actual, what are we going to court for? Is it to try and, are they trying to ask the city to remediate that land? Because I know that ExxonMobil was originally the issue, but they sold the property, didn't they? So what's the negotiation here, I guess?
It's the question about liability, ultimately.
Right. Why is the city, I'm asking, why is the city involved in it when it's a prior building that did the work or did the nastiness to the ground?
I'll let you ask that through agenda review.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of issues related to that, and with the joining properties and things, maybe a good thing would be to get answers to the questions that you asked, certainly for this cycle. But since we have regular updates with NBD, it might be worth getting a little bit of an update on kind of where the vacuum oil site stands in general. It's a big piece that it includes like 15.5 acres, obviously on the river, and is a big issue within the Plex neighborhood. I know Councilmember Harris is particularly interested in this. So it probably would be worth Joanne having a little time spent on it with NBD the next time we get together with them. If council's in agreement with that. Are there any other questions on 310? If not, we'll go to Introductory 311, which is legislation related to the New York State Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, which authorizes the mayor to apply to New York State for grants. Any questions on 311? So that takes us to the Public Safety Committee, which is Introductory 312.
James, I actually remember what my question was about choice. I looked at details. Do you mind just adding that?
Let's go back. Yeah, go ahead.
So there were issues in the past about choice being applicable for housing developments with more than 3 units. And I just want to know a status update for how Comida has decided to handle those proposals. Thank you.
Okay. So then, if there's no other questions related to Parks and Public Works, we'll move to the Public Safety Committee and Introductory number 312, which is legislation amending the 22-23 budget of the police department by $64,000+ and undistributed by $8,700 to reflect the balance of carryover funds from existing grants. Are there any questions?
Yes. So with the, can you share any information about the domestic violence abuse team? Like, for example, how many people are involved? What are their backgrounds? Are they solely sworn officers, or does this include non-sworn experts? And any of the impact they have, like how does the community access this specific unit? And are there reports regarding like what happens when this group shows up, and how is their impact tracked?
Okay. Any other questions on introductory 312? If not, we'll move to introductory 313, which is Recreation and Human Services Committee. That's legislation amending the 22-23 budget of the Department of Recreation and Human Services by $2,500. And that reflects the remaining portion of the 21 Petco Love Animal Sheltering and Adoptions Grant. Any question on introductory 313? Now we'll go to 314, which is legislation related to the city's for financial empowerment fund summer jobs connect grant. That does two things. It amends the 22-23 budget by $20,000 to reflect a portion of the grant. It also amends ordinance number 2022-110 to reflect budget change, the budget of DRIS as the source of funds for previously authorized agreements with Consumer Credit Council. Are there any questions on that introductory? No questions. We have introductory 315, legislation related to New York State Office of Victim Services grant. It authorized an agreement with New York State Office of Victim Services. It also amends the budget to reflect the new grant award amount.
How do they keep track of the kinds of services victims of crime need, and how do they keep track of, when a need is met, outcomes, all those things?
Are there any other questions?
I see that the city has received this funding since 2014. Has there been what has been the increase in funding, or what has that funding looked like for that entire time frame since 2014? How much have we received over those 8 years from that grant, please?
We'll investigate that. And if there's no other questions, we'll go to introductory 316, which is legislation establishing $100,000 as maximum annual compensation for an agreement with CCSI as the fiscal sponsor for Rise Up Rochester.
Is this funding coming from the $5 million that was allocated by the president and the mayor a few months ago? And also, can we get a status update on that allocation? Have any funds been distributed? If so, how much? And how are community organizations able to apply for funding?
Okay. Other questions on wraparound services for crime victims? The next introductory is 317, legislation authorizing an agreement and the appropriation of a $15,000 grant from the Avant-Grid Foundation for the 2022 Cool Sweep program, which is very appropriate given how hot it's been the past 2 days. Any questions on the Cool Sweep grant? That takes us to introductory 318, legislation establishing $15,000 as maximum annual compensation for an agreement with the University of Rochester Warner School of Education Center for Professional Development and Education Reform This is for providing public health advocacy and research training for the Flower City Public Health Corps.
If no questions, I want to jump back to 317 real quick on how do we track how many people are utilizing each spray park? And if we have that information, I would love to get that information, please.
Okay. Are there any questions on the introductory for the Flower City Public Health Corps?
Actually, just a status check on when they will, I guess, number one, are they all being assigned to outside organizations? And when will those assignments or other work assignments be established?
That takes us to introductory 320. Legislation related to funds for Pathways to Peace from the Rochester City School District. This authorizes an intermunicipal agreement with the Rochester City School District. It also amends the 22-23 budget of the Office of the Mayor by $447,000 plus. Also, please note the legislation, as you would have gotten correspondence through Clerk Hazel Washington's office, the legislation is revised to correct the funding source. So there's a slight revision to the actual legislation. Are there any questions?
Are there specific schools who would receive these services, or is this like, and yeah, I guess that would be the question. How are the staff, Pathways to Peace staff, allocated to the different schools?
The next item is one we don't always have, which comes before the Committee of the Whole. And that is legislation confirming the appointment of David M. Smith as Chief of the Rochester Police Department.
Be weird if we had questions now. That's what the confirmation hearing is for, right?
Exactly. And I know we've been working diligently on scheduling issues with that. So Katie's been doing a great deal of work with that. I appreciate her doing that.
She looks really happy about it too. Thanks, Katie.
Anytime.
We love all of you dearly, but there's 9 of you and your schedules. It's amazing how they can absolutely positively have conflicts every which way with trying to get some schedule. But it's the nature of the beast, right? So that's what we're trying to work with. So this has been a little bit more of a challenge than normal, but we'll certainly get there.
We're like 99% of the way there.
Yes. And then I just want to point out Matt Simonis is on this call, and Matt is an alumni of City Council because he was way back when was an aide to I believe it was Councilmember Matt Haig, if I remember correctly. Former Councilmember Matt Haig, and Matt is in the mayor's office now, and he's going to be helping a little bit with Josanne and working with obviously the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the mayor's chief of staff to provide some support to City Council. So glad to see Matt on the call and see him participating.
I'm on vacation tomorrow and Monday. I gave Matt 5 minutes to learn the job. I'm out of here.
Congratulations, Matt.
Yeah,
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right, folks, if there's no other questions, I think that wraps up what we plan to do. Go ahead, Stanley.
One quick question. The legislation for appointing a new member of the Police Accountability Board, just any updates or any information we can have about that?
I think President Melendez, jumped off, didn't realize that you were going to ask that question. And I believe he does have some updates on that and was intending to engage with you on it. So I'm going to defer to him instead of answering that at this point, because I think he does, I know, because he mentioned to me this morning, he intended to engage with council on that, and I'll leave that to him. But I'll mention that you asked the question, Councilman Martin.
Sounds good. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, you're welcome. And then, of course, also we had a sad note and acknowledge the passing of former City Council President Gladys Santiago, which we had sent out some communication on a little bit earlier. Okay, thank you, everybody.